All right. I think we are up and running. So I'm going to switch over to the drawing stream layout and we will get started with today's stream. And we'll start by creating BGM as we usually do. So let's jump over to the other layout. All right, what I have on screen here is the character study faces that we were working on before. We're going to continue the experiment for creating a character here. But before we do that, like the message says on screen, I am going to create some background music here using the loop, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to try and move this thing a little bit closer and make sure I'm sort of pointed at my camera so that my model's not wigging out while I do this. All right. Let me check my loop settings. I think the actual audio on the mic is fine. It should be about where we left it last time we did this. But let me see. For today's BGM track, I was thinking about the style and tempo based on the last one we did. Let me save this and pull up the last one from our previous drawing stream. I can't remember what we used that one for. That might have been from the previous jam stream. Yeah, this was the last track we worked on in jam stream, I believe. I'd have to go back and look at the footage. Let's go back one more. I don't think it was this one either. I could be wrong. I have a really bad short-term memory. No matter. We'll go ahead and kind of start from scratch. Could try and do something more electronic for today's BGM track. Let's see. Maybe something a bit more up-tempo. And I'm going to try and do this layer by layer, which is not something I'm particularly good at. But if we're doing the percussion track, I'm going to try and do a multi-step layered approach where I do things like the kick first, then add some hats, and using overdub, or putting all of these instruments together on one to set up just the rhythm. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to mess around with some filter options to change up the way some of the things like the kicks sound. So let's see. I want to try and put a filter on it. This was something I talked about doing before, and we sort of bailed on it just for the sake of time. But let's see. All right, what filter on? Let's see if we can record it and see what it sounds like in playback. Interesting. The kick itself is very similar to the normal one. It's a little bit more muffled. But if we added a throat kick behind it, it would probably give it more punch. And I might even be able to use guitar to bass just on the kick to give it more low end. Let's see. Because I'm still learning how to overdub, I'm going to save each iteration of just the percussion in case I screwed up and not have to record the whole thing again. So let's see. We'll go guitar to bass, and then we'll do like a throat kick, like a with it. We'll see what it sounds like. All right, guitar to bass. Okay, that gives it kind of more of a heavier impact on the kick, almost like a heartbeat. Now, the real question is, am I going to be able to get hats and snare in overdub on the first try? So we'll see. Real quick. All right. I was thinking like an offbeat hat. That's 3. 4. Not 3. Pretty simple. The real trick will be getting a snare on there and not having it be offbeat. Hey, Wazzy's here. Wazzy says, I got my orange sticks in the mail today. No level of your bullying can hurt me today. You know what you need to do, Wazzy, as part of the ongoing orange saga? One, because I don't know if us folks in the States have ever seen orange sticks. You need to put up a video either on Twitter or on your YouTube channel showing how they work. Like showing how they open oranges, because I've never seen them. I've never even seen that product in a store. I think it'd be good for the sake of demoing, and also so people who have never seen one can understand how they work. I can't guarantee that people aren't going to bully you just because you use an orange stick, but I personally am curious to see how you use them. All right, so we have kick line. We have hats. Now we need a snare. Now we could do a BGM. I'm gonna have to be a little bit careful on the input, but I'm a little bit concerned it might hit too hard. We can try it. So this is gonna be offbeat as well. Like that. Let's see. I think my BMG might have been a little too prolonged. It shouldn't be more than one beat. I have it had it spread a little bit. Let's reload that. Yeah, I think it still might be a little bit too impactful. Maybe we can go with a lighter snare. Hey, Abby's here. Abby says, "Yo, what's up, Abby? Welcome to the art stream or drawing stream. We are getting set up at BGM using the loop station to get started here, and then we'll get into the actual character drawing." Might be easier if we do a double layered, less impactful snare, like maybe something like an outwards K, and then maybe something else like a click layered on top of it, so that's dual snare, but not quite as strong as a BGM. So let's see, start this. All right, I think that sounds a little bit better. Let me see if I can get a click on top of that. All right, so far so good. Let me save that. Now that we have the percussion line, I don't have to worry too much about saving every iteration, because I'm going to do the rest of the instruments on separate tracks and can just record them over if I screw them up. Now, what do we want to add on top of this? I think for our previous one, we experimented with a hi-hat run, something like... Now, the real question is that going to compete with the hat that's already on the main percussion track? So we can try it. I don't think it competes too much. It's actually kind of subtle, hard to hear. But I think that'll be functional. Now we need a bass line. And I was thinking a little bit earlier before the stream, since I knew I was going to have to come up with a BGM track for us to use while we're drawing here. I wanted to come up with some bass line or instrumentation that's a little bit different from what we've been doing the last couple sessions with BGM. But the real question is, what instruments do I want to use? We could go guitar to bass, which is kind of like the standby. I tend to default to guitar to bass. And I was just looking at the fader. This might be a little bit high. In fact, I got to think about where the playback's going to be when I'm actually going to be drawing and talking, so I'm not competing with the BGM. If I leave it about there, is it good enough volume that you guys can still hear me? Wazzy says, that click is what your bones sound like when you stand up, old man. You're not kidding. I think the lower half of my body, on this human body, is just going to fall off in the next 5 years. During this last week, the reason why I wasn't streaming was because I had family in town. My brother from lower down on the West Coast was visiting here, and I have never gone bowling as many times as I did when he was here, since that's one of his things, and I was paying for it at the beginning of the week. It was fun, but my joints were not happy with me. Alright, let's see. What do we want for bass? I could try and do some throat bass notes. I wanted to try and do something that was a little bit higher up. So I might just mess around with a couple different bass things and get them to loop, and we'll see what it sounds like together. Because normally we go for guitar to bass, like that electric string bass type of sound, but I kind of want to switch it up for it. So let's see. We could do something like... Maybe whole step instead of a half. Could even do just one note up and then down, see what it sounds like. At this point, I'm more concerned about how clean it's going to sound. Not bad. We could pair it with an actual guitar to bass underneath it for a low end, so it's the same melody, just stepped down like an entire octave. That might give it a bit more of a boost, and then if that sounds good, we'll leave it where it is and then continue on. Quite a full octave down. All right. I think that will be functional. Let me see if I can drop the overall volume down now that we have all the tracks here. Oh, I can actually do it per thing. Give me 1 second. Wazzy says, "Is your brother an alien too?" Yes. He came here from Homeworld after me. And he lived in the same state as me for a bit, and then he eventually moved further south. If I told you where he lived, that'd give a really big indicator of what state on the West Coast I'm in. But he came up to visit, since it's been a while since I've seen him. One sec, I'm just manually adjusting the volume on all these. I think I can turn it down a little bit. There we go. Hopefully it should be fine there. Let me know if I need to adjust it. In fact, I'll turn down in my monitor so I can hear. Wazzy says, you say this as if I or anyone else knows more than 7 states. Yeah, but there aren't many states on one coast. Alright, let me get rid of this. Yeah, maybe we'll leave it here in case we decide to redo the BGM track. Oh, I forgot to reorganize my folders. I'm sure that's going to drive Wazzy nuts. Let me do that. We're going to need to reference these faces at some point later, but we don't need them at the moment, so I can put them in a folder and get them out of the way so my directory here doesn't look so cluttered. Okay, let's do this. Numbers, we don't need them. We'll create a new layer up here. We're going to be doing some pose sketching. Wazzy says, New York, Texas, Florida, California, corn, West Virginia, and New Jersey. Those are in the States. Corn? Corn's in the States. It's not a state. You thinking of Nebraska? They have a lot of corn in Nebraska. Today's going to become a geography lesson, apparently. Okay, let's see how we're going to be doing a pose here. Wazzy says, corn is a state. It's the middle one. Corn is a state of mind and a vegetable. I can't tell if you're trolling or not. There's no state called corn, you know that. Wazzy says the entire middle section is just corn and occasionally potatoes. I think they grow wheat in some of those other mid-state states, mid-country states. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a rough shape primary, and then I will see if I like the way it looks, and then do kind of a more fleshed out primary that's going to become part of the sketch layer. I do like how in Wazi's sampling of the states, she has some on the majority of the East Coast, one in the South End, and then one on the West Coast. Only one on the West Coast. And of all states, it had to be California. I would be very concerned if it turns out the rest of the world's representation of what the West Coast in the States is California. It's the biggest. But California sucks. Well, parts of California suck. I don't like South Central or Southern Cal. Northern California is not bad. But every time I've had to go to LA, it just raises my blood pressure exponentially. Not a fan. Let's see, we could probably rotate this one a little bit. I'm not going to go full JoJo on the pose here, but I do want to get a bit of an angle, a bit of lean. Wazi says, okay, I have to send you how the rest of the world sees the states. Yeah, go for it. I get the feeling I'm not going to be surprised. I knew someone in Earth School who was from the Netherlands, and this was a long time ago in the 2000s, and I asked him, I said, because he was here on like a study abroad program, and he'd never really been in the States before, and so I asked him, what do people in the Netherlands think of when they think of Americans? And he told me, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said essentially the rest of the world, his peers where he lived, when they thought about Americans, they basically thought of The Simpsons and George Bush Jr. That's what Americans were to them. And I told him that's an, on one hand, kind of an accurate representation, and on the other hand, a little bit concerning. Wazi says that's not wrong. Especially wasn't wrong in the 2000s. I don't know what the de facto stereotypical American is like now. I'm sure it's much worse. Wazi says basically who's their president. I feel like that would be true from 2016 to 2020. When Obama was in office, I feel like the rest of the world didn't really hate him that much. I feel like maybe the exception of some countries that we were messing around in. For the 8 years, was it, that Obama was in office, I feel like the global perception of America, at least from the political and diplomatic standpoint, was pretty neutral. It was definitely better than when Bush was in office, that's for sure. And then when Trump was president, that sort of torpedoed everything as far as global perception goes. Even Clinton, before Bush Jr., didn't really tick off the majority of the world. He had his scandals and whatnot, like, internally, but foreign relations weren't that bad under him. Alright, might need to scale head down a little bit. Again, the reason why I'm working so zoomed out here is just so I can get an approximate pose. I'm going to blow this up and then actually start roughing in the proportions and shapes once I figure out what I want to do. And this doesn't really need to be that detailed. For the sake of designing a character and concept work, I want kind of a more neutral pose anyway, because I'm going to use that base to draw on the physiology and proportions of the character, but then I'm also going to be using it to design outfits and the way the actual character looks. So it doesn't need to be a dynamic or really fancy pose, because it'd be a nightmare to try and assign concept stuff using that as a base. It really just needs to be pretty simple, neutral standing pose. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. Oh, I see Wazzy sent me something via Discord relevant to our conversation here. Let me take a look at that. I can't tell what news broadcast that's from because I can't read the writing. But basically, to give context to what Wazzy sent me, it's a map of the United States, and it's basically sectioned off into four sections, not equal fourths. It's the west coast is just California. The entire middle to south of the country is Texas. The lower half of the east coast is Florida, and the upper half is New York. That's funny. I gotta save that. Okay, so I think that'll do it for just kind of a basic pose. I may do something with this arm right here. Might make something like the fingers go out like that. I don't know, I suck at drawing hands. It doesn't really matter for the sake of concept design, but we'll see. We're going to take this, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit towards our actual sort of working size, and I'm going to rough in some actual physiology and shapes. And then once I'm happy with the proportions and the way the shapes look, that's going to be our base for designing outfits and whatnot. And maybe what we can do is translate the actual character head from before. In fact, I think that'd be good. We want the character to have an actual head and face and hair and whatnot. Wazzy says, listen, at least people know a state. No one knows any Canadian provinces. People know one town in Canada. I know areas in Canada, but I don't know if I could distinguish whether or not they're a province or a city. Like, you live... Well, I know where you live. I won't mention it here on stream in case you don't want it being widely talked about. But Quebec is a province, right? I know people that live in Vancouver, but I don't know if Vancouver is considered a province. Alright, let's scale this up. You want to be able to do several concepts. I'm not going to make this fill the whole page. We'll go about here, and then I can work with that. Now from here, I can go ahead and start roughing in the actual physiology. So things like the head shape. Wazzy says, Quebec is the second worst province. Vancouver is not a province. Vancouver is a city. Okay. Again, I know areas because I know people that live in respective areas. Like a good friend of mine lives in Toronto. I think he lives in Toronto. It's either Toronto or Ontario. I don't remember. But I've heard Canada's cool. Again, I live relatively close to Canada, and I've never been there. If it wasn't COVID times, then I would definitely make a trip over there to check it out. Or go on a long road trip and go harass Wazzy in person. I get the feeling her end of Canada is probably a little bit further from where I live. Wazzy says Toronto is in Ontario. Ontario's the province then? I'm asking. I'm not stating as a fact. Again, I don't know much at all about Canadian geography. Wazzy says, "Can I guess? Can I guess the state?" You can guess the state in Discord. I wouldn't do it here. Not that I think you're the only one here right now, but people watch this later. I'd rather not people know what state I live in the moment. If you can guess it in Discord, I'll tell you. Alright, what I'm doing is I'm just doing some rough sketches for the physiology here. I may have to adjust this on as we go. This is going to be a little bit of a different process from the last actual female character I drew, since I was basically inking a sketch. We're doing the whole thing from scratch because I need to practice drawing things from scratch digitally. And most of these marks are sort of like proportion markers for me. And I may have to do like a character head height check and see, because I can skew and adjust different parts of the anatomy. I'm not too worried about the proportions being super dialed in here, but I'm gonna make sure they're where I want them to be before I start doing things like adding in the facial features and then ultimately putting things like outfits together. Wazzy says no clamp legs. If it was clamp legs, then let's see. The hands would probably end about here, but the upper thighs, quads area would end like down here, and then it would go like down here, and you'd have a foot in this area, and it'd be really thin. If I remember from the clamp designs, not only did their characters have really long limbs, but they were really kind of like scrawny and stick-like. probably zoom out and check the proportions on the legs. Let's put the arms in. Torso might be a little too compressed, which is easy enough to fix. Oh, now we gotta deal with that left arm. I don't know if this character's gonna be holding anything, a weapon or whatnot. I haven't decided even what the character's role is gonna be. Main point is to do kind of design practice. We'll worry about the actual character specifics later. We could do something like this. Boy, do I suck at drawing hands. This is a placeholder. I don't know if I want to have the character waving. Yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Could be worse. Hide the underlayer primary. Now it's just a matter of figuring out if I want to make adjustments to the proportions at all. The pose itself is fine. Again, I wanted to go as neutral as possible for a pose so I could show off things like details. But let's do kind of a head height check here. If I copy this, move this over here. Where are we at? Do something like this. I'm not in a habit of doing head height checks, but I kind of want to see from the character design perspective if I'm being consistent with how I draw these characters. So I'm gonna put this sort of scale in place, and then I'll probably use it in the future just to sort of track how my character heights are either being consistent or not. So let's see, if we just duplicate this a bunch of times, it'll tell us how many character head heights we've got. Looks like we've got 5 and about a half. This section down here Interesting. I don't think there's any rule I follow. I think in some of those old how to draw manga books, they have like a recommended. Sorry, my camera keeps sliding over here. I think they said like 7 head heights is standard or whatever. I'm not too worried about that. I'm just curious to see if I follow a consistent proportion scale here. Or if I wanted to skew different parts, we do it that way. I'm going to stick all those reference head things in their own folder for later use and get them out of the way. Get rid of this. Get rid of that. Just doing some cleanup here. I got details. All right. I think we're good for the proportions. I can always adjust things in the actual drawing on the fly, but I want to create a workable template to be able to use and reference when we're doing things like outfits stuff later. So we can delete the rough sketch. Number 1. This is the one we're going to keep. So now, the next step is putting some actual details on this. And I think the easiest way to do that would be to actually go in and start working on some inking. The real question is, do I want to try and sketch stuff in at the rough phase? I think I would do. It may take a little longer, but I think it'll be better for the exercise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sketching in things like the face, which will be consistent across the different models. That'll be fine. What is up with my camera today? I have my webcam that I use for streams. Normally it's sitting on top of my tablet, which is my main monitor, but because I have my tablet flipped down to draw, it's sitting on like a freestanding support. I don't know what you call it, but I bought this stand plus ring light thing. It's like a makeup YouTuber kit, but I needed the light, and so my webcam snaps on there, but it's on kind of like a pivoting ball, and it for some reason keeps falling over. I think it might just be too heavy. So if all of a sudden my model looks like it's just sliding off frame, that's why I need to keep an eye on that. Okay, what we can do is let's see which one we want. I'll put them back in order later. But I need a reference field, start sketching in the character's actual face. think when we talked about this one on the last session, we wanted to work with this particular hairstyle. And I think I mentioned wanting to change it a little bit. Still going to be about the same length, sort of medium length hair. Come on, camera. Medium length hair. I might change the way the outer parts are sort of feathered. But I do like this part right here. I don't think I've done that on a character design before, with that sort of texture look. And then maybe I'll change the back, but roughly the same shape. So we're going to start sketching in the facial features and then the hair, and then that's going to be consistent across all these. Once we have things that are going to carry over from version of the model forward, I'll probably ink those just to have them consistent, and then we'll work off line work, and I'll figure that out when I get there. Drop the line weight down on my mechanical pencils as I'm sketching here. I'm pretty much going to follow what I've done over here. I'll make sure I'm on the right layer though. There we go. And now we're going to start sketching in the details. I think I'm going to keep the same kind of facial expression. Same one you see over here on the larger sketch. Like we talked about on the previous session when we were working through some of the different ideas for the character. The whole disposition and mood of this character is kind of grumpy and pessimistic. Kind of an over it look. But not necessarily sad or kind of depressed, just really more tired. I'm going to be making minor adjustments to things like the angle and sort of the direction as I go. And I may have to go back and do sort of a sweeping cleanup for things like the orientation. Hence why you'll see me flipping my canvas back and forth. It's something I need to do more often. Now let's see if we can get the hair. Gotta think of how I want to do the locks falling kind of this part of the head. Kind of in line with what we have over here. For this part, I think I'm gonna make it a little bit not spiky per se, just a little bit more what do I call it? Not billowing. What I'll do is I'll kind of rough in the rest here, and then I'll look at it and see if I want to make any changes. Okay. I'm gonna drop my eraser line weight down a little bit since I'm working kind of close in here. But I think that'll work. If we rough in things like the eyes and whatnot, I might do something. I was thinking about this as we were finishing up just on the head here. If I do an actual ink layer for just the head and neck, since that's what's going to be sort of carried across all the different versions of the model that we work with here. I guess I can ink in the actual irises. I have to do kind of a sidebar thing on drawing eyes. It's something I want to change, and it's going to require a bit more work. Come on, camera. So I might do something like, let's put them in here. The irises will be over here, with the character looking at the camera. And then maybe ink in the actual lines, but not the color, since I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with that yet. And that looks like a shady link. Be gone. Alright, let's see if we can... I gotta think about a good way I want to do this. This particular format of doing multiple iterations of character concepts is not something I've readily done in a while. And I'm trying to figure out the most efficient way to do it so that I can follow this format in the future when I want to do character concepts. So let me see. That's the reason why it sounds like I'm kind of figuring everything out on the fly. But let's do this. I'm going to ink in the outline. And start there, and then I'll think how I want to apply it going forward. Because what I could do is do a full headshot, this whole area you guys see here, ink all that in, and then every time I do a new iteration, just copy it over. But I kind of want to do an actual colored thing, so I don't have to redo that every time I do a render. So let's see. We'll just start here with the character and see what happens. Probably gonna have to zoom, kind of change my perspective and zoom in and out while flipping my canvas, since I don't want to have to go in and make a bunch of edits later. Whatever we do here is going to be on all iterations of the character. And like I mentioned before, just for placeholder purposes, we'll put the irises in here. I work on the hair. I think I'll drop my line weight down a little more, a couple pixels for the hair. I tend to go a couple units or pixels, however that's measured in line weight, down by 2 from wherever I'm inking on things like the body. Just because it tends to work a little bit better to have a slightly lighter line weight with some pressure for hair. Alright, that should close off that section of the hair. When I actually hide the primary, that'll give me an idea of any sections I need to clean up. And we'll do that right now. Like I mentioned, this is something I was talking about, I think last stream for drawing, and definitely on the one before. I found out why my line art was getting pixelated every time I tried to scale it or move it or translate it. And it's because it was rasterized. And I may have knew that in the past and just forgot. But in order to avoid that happening, and I can demonstrate it here, it should show up in Clip Studio Paint, which is what we're working in here for the software. If you draw in a regular rasterized layer, then you'll be at the mercy of the software anti-aliasing whatever it is you do. If you do it in vector, you shouldn't have that problem. And that's what we're going to find out. I'm just doing some cleanup in here around the eye. So if I take this is a simple line layer for the head here, and let's just say I wanted to rotate it or whatnot. If I do it in vector, a vector layer, and then now I try and do something like rotate it, I think it should anti-alias a lot less and not look fuzzy, just because it's not applying to a rasterized layer. Yeah. You can see here, doing a pretty dramatic rotation here. In fact, I can't really tell zoomed out this far if it did any sort of anti-aliasing or smudging on the outline. I don't think it did. Versus if I did a regular layer, and let's say we did a circle like this. Really lumpy circle. And we did the same thing. It's a little bit tough to see because of the resolution, but if I zoom in, here's what it looked like before. Here's what it looks like after. You can see how it sort of fuzzes and anti-aliases all the way around the line because it's doing it on a rasterized layer versus vector. And that's really handy if you're doing this kind of work in Clip Studio. So that's a pro tip. But what we can do here is do some clean up and zoom in, and then I think I am going to assign color here, just because this particular part of the drawing is going to be the same on all the different iterations and versions of outfits and whatnot. Clean up the parts around the eye a little bit. one thing I've noticed about working in vector, it's a little bit more finicky when you're trying to edit small sections, because unlike a rasterized layer, which is just putting essentially ink down on paper, vector, it's calculating everything mathematically, all the lines. And so if you try and do some minor, really close-in small edits, then the program gets a little bit confused. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Alright, we're going to call this lines. Set this as a reference. Basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a set of color layers. And maybe, I was thinking whether or not I should do fully shaded or just do flat colors. Maybe I'll start with flat colors for now. It's not going to be super important, especially if I decide not to shade the actual outfits. And I haven't decided yet. I care more about coming up with the designs and the details than having these be fully rendered character pieces right now. Let's see. We can do it like this. Your skin tone first. And for skin tone, this character not going to be super pale, kind of medium-ish tones. I may have to mess around with the shades a little bit until I get a color I'm happy with here. This character's not going to be quite as pale as the last one I worked on. In fact, I think that shade's pretty decent. That'll work. We'll keep that there. Need to create a boundary here because I'm going to be basically coloring everything from the neck to the upper part of the shoulders, and that's it. And then we're going to use that on each version of the model. So let's do this. Add in this section here. Do a separate layer for the hair and eyebrows. For the hair, I'm thinking kind of a dark red. We can fill it down, see what it looks like, and then alter it as necessary. Maybe kind of like an off maroon color. And same for the eyebrows. What we can do, like we've done on previous drawings and concepts, is if I want to play around with the levels to adjust the shade, it's pretty easy to do. I just need to get everything filled down so it's properly colored. will say that the color assignment is easier on vector. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of missed spots. And probably because the line work is not rasterized. I guess we could do one less basic color thing for the eyes so they're not just white. And do the eyes as well. The whites of the eyes. Eye color. I hadn't really thought about this. We go purple. I'm not doing heterochromia on this one. I haven't done it on any of my concepts, and I do like the way different colored irises look. I just feel like it's a little bit played out stylistically. Like no shade if someone does that. I just feel like it's very common. So even though I like it, for this particular character, we'll go with the same color. And we'll stick all of the layers and everything in the same folder. Put it here like this. Now if we zoom out, again, flat colors. You can hide this. If we take what we've done here, sort of line it up with where it would roughly fit on the actual model. I'm gonna have to adjust that a little, I think. If anything, it's a little high up. That should be fine. It's gonna look a little bit weird for now. That's okay. In fact, we can even hide it, because the real reason we sort of set up a template like this is to be able to work on the primary and do things like outfit design. We don't really need to have the head there. It's just going to need to be sort of merged in with whatever we ink and color for the outfit before we move on to the next one. But before we start experimenting with some outfit designs, I'm going to run to the restroom real quick. So let's see, I'm gonna turn my mic off. I'm gonna leave the BGM on since it's playing through the same device. I'll be back in just 1 second. Alright, before we move on and start sketching out some character outfits, I'm going to make sure my mic's set right, and I'm going to see if I can remix the BGM and switch things up. Alright, let's see what we got. Just gonna move my mic over here. What I've got is scatter. Scatter is currently applied to the first 3, I think. Not the baseline, so I'm going to turn it on. That's interesting. And this is at about 50% effect level. That's not bad. Let's see what else we can add on top of scatter. I think the rhythm is fine, but maybe a distortion effect. That's what filter will kind of cut most of the audio out. I don't know if I want to do that. That's ring modulator. I think that one kind of overpowers the entire track. This is with delay. That's not bad. It definitely sounds kind of unusual, which is kind of the point. We'll leave that about there. Almost sounds like a boss theme or something like that in a video game. Alright, for the last part of the stream today, I'm going to start sketching out some outfits and some ideas for what the character is going to be actually wearing. And maybe just for reference. Where is it? We can keep the character reference over there. I won't be needing it, but just as a reminder of what we're working with here. Alright. Now we're good to go. And one thing I was thinking about for a potential outfit, I thought a little bit about this before. I haven't spent a ton of time just picking up ideas. This is going to be a bit more of a kind of a free-form exercise. I kind of like the idea of like a long coat. Like use something like a high-collared coat or something that kind of covers the lower part of the face, like the chin. For this part of the concept exercise, and this may take more than one stream, I'm going to basically just sketch out some ideas, copy it over, create a new layer, and if I have time, just do another one, and then just kind of do a bunch of different ideas, and then we'll kind of bounce them off each other and see what makes the most sense for the character. In my opinion, this is the most interesting part of the character study, is just thinking about ideas for what the character's wearing. I was initially thinking of something kind of a longer, not necessarily all the way down to the feet like a trench coat, but something that was at least cutting off around the lower thigh. And I kind of like the idea of an asymmetric cut to the coat, where the layers on each sort of half are a different length. Because we're just brainstorming ideas, there doesn't need to be any sort of rationale or rhyme or reason behind the outfits. Just throwing ideas at the wall, and we'll see what sticks. Ah, Penguin's here. Penguin says, "Hi, Raku, at work like always and came to say hi." Heyo, Penguin. How you doing today? Hopefully, I know I say it every time, just like you always come to pop in when you're at work, but hopefully your work day is going well. It's the weekend, so I know people tend to hit the grocery stores and whatnot, so hopefully it's not too crazy and hectic. Alright, let's see. I may change the edges of the coat here. We'll see. What I'm adding here is kind of like textured plating almost. It's like an armored coat. Again, just kicking around ideas doesn't necessarily need to make much sense at this point. Penguin says, it's been hectic, been busy, and a storm recently hit, and I was the only one who cleared the mess it caused. Not even my managers knew what the mess was until I told them. Well, that was very proactive of you to do that. I know I've been watching a lot of things online in the news and people on Twitter talking about the other end of the country from where I live. They got slammed with tornadoes and stuff. It sounds pretty bad, especially in areas like Kentucky. So hopefully it's not tornadoes that are hitting where you're at. But yeah, it sounds bad. I know there's already been a death toll just as a result of the tornadoes themselves hitting, which is no good. Penguin says, that was my end. I don't live in Kentucky, but I'm one of its neighboring states. I see. So you're part of that same area that was affected by the storms. Well, like I said, hopefully it didn't affect you too directly, but in the meantime, stay safe. Hopefully it's the worst of it's gone, but just be careful. I know I've talked about it a couple times. Where I live on the West Coast isn't tornado country, but we do get a lot of heavy storms and winds that can cause some damage. About now, just not to the extent that it's on the other end of the country, thankfully. Penguin says, it didn't really, but it had effects. Yeah, I bet. And you're seeing it work and whatnot, but yeah, just be safe. Be safe out there. All right. So what we have here, again, kind of an asymmetrical coat, which is, again, the idea. As we experiment with ideas for character designs and outfits. Now the question is, what do I want to do for the sleeves? Penguin says, one question, did you like the cake? Yeah, the cake was very fancy. I don't know if you got that from the store where you work or elsewhere, but it was definitely a nice cake. So I appreciate you sharing. The internet always appreciates cake, especially when it's not a lie. Alright, we can do something like this. Again, I'll put the hand down here. Penguin says, I bought it at my work. Well, give my kudos to the bakery. Penguin says, my cake is never a lie, unlike Gladys. Yep, that was the reference I was going for, dude. You nailed it. Like I mentioned before when we were talking about cakes and desserts, I really like marzipan on cake. It's a little more expensive, obviously, but that's one of my favorite ways to have cake, with like a wrapped marzipan. It's been forever since I've had one, but it's pretty solid. I'm going to just leave that hand there for now. Penguin says, my preferred way is whipped cream frosting. Simple, but I like it. Yeah, that's legit. Frosting wise, I do like buttercream. Or if it's like a really fancy type cake, a whipped cream cheese frosting is pretty banging. Obviously, it's going to be more rich and not good for you. But I mean, if you're going to eat a cake, you might as well go all in. Experiment with some decorative markings on the coat. I'm just going to put them here, and I don't know if they'd be on any sort of final version, but for now. Sort of like painted patterning. Now the real question is for the legs. You could do something like kind of loose fitting, not necessarily like military fatigues, but loose fitting pants and then kind of higher boots might not be a bad look. Penguin says, gotta get back to work. Had fun watching. Alright, man. Thanks for popping by and tuning in. Hopefully things don't get too much more crazy for the rest of your work day. But I will catch you later. Take it easy. I'm going to experiment around with some designs and styles for these shoes. Kind of like the idea of reinforced shoes, not necessarily armored, more reinforced or layered work shoes or boots. Something like that. Maybe we'll cut it off a little bit higher and have an actual... There we go. That looks better. Kind of match up with what we have here. Like an upper section of the shoe part. Sort of have the pants sort of tucked into the upper end of the boots. Like so. Alright, let's zoom out and take a look at the first iteration of the character outfit we've got here. Let me do that. Not going to necessarily be helpful for the final. But for the sake of where the actual head is going to fall, if we hide the primary, this is sort of what it would look like. I'll need to move it back. KNSAP says, what do you think about merging the JAO with Khabarovsky, Cry, or Amur Oblast? I have no idea what any of that means. Sounds complicated, whatever it is. Alright, let's hide you. And for the primary, we'll do this. Actually, I want to move that over, be relatively in line for the sake of templates. Let's do it this way. There we go. I'm just realizing that having the hand in that upraised position kind of makes the overall sketch a little bit wider, but that's okay. We should have room for several of them here on the template, which is fine. Okay. So what we have here in concept number 1, again, this is sort of a medium to longer length, not full length coat. Which is interesting, kind of a layered, textured coat. To me, this looks like a garment that would be kind of a just everyday attire, nothing formal, but something you'd wear when you're out and about. I think it's functional. Not a bad start. This particular character doesn't strike me as one that would wear something really flashy or kind of like ornate or really gaudy with like jewelry and a lot of other accessories. So we'll keep that as sort of an idea. I want to do maybe 4 in total, and I think we may have to spend another stream specifically dedicated to outfit ideas. Today was getting the primary set up, getting like the base head render we've got right here set up. And so next time we'll probably be able to spend the majority of the time just brainstorming ideas for armor or outfits, clothing designs, and whatnot. But we could start roughing in some basic details. I do need to end the stream at the top of the hour here because I've got some folks coming over in a little while. I'm gonna go hit the kitchen and start prepping stuff, but we can go ahead and get started at the very least. So if we drop down here, give ourselves sort of a place to work from. Kind of like the idea of experimenting around with armor, like not necessarily full plate armor or anything like that, but functional combat type armor. So we'll experiment around with some ideas, or at least get started on them, sort of see what that takes us. This particular character's people or race specialize in a lot of asymmetrical patterns and things on armor, as you can see with the coat. So I kind of want to continue that through line, experiment around with some ideas. So this would be something kind of like a full arm gauntlet or protective piece of armor that's worn on shoulder and then the length of the arm. These sections would be divided up and be kind of designed to be flexible, and so you can move and your arm wouldn't be just stuck on there. You can even have the entire set of armor and plating go over the side of the body. Again, asymmetry is sort of a running theme here. You can do something that sort of cuts off at the midsection in order to leave this particular arm free for something like operating a weapon. Again, we'll experiment around with just some combinations of designs. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything final or structured or practical for that matter. That's not necessarily the point of brainstorming. It might be the most impractical looking outfit in the history of armor or clothing. What I see here is kind of like a cut-off bodysuit up here. Get rid of that. This whole section on the upper torso kind of cuts off at the shoulder, and then maybe there'd be something else on this arm. Something like a midsection or lower torso guard. It's sort of like a long draping part fabric that goes down here, heading almost to the floor, maybe a few inches shy of hitting the ground, so it wouldn't be dragging. So right away, what we've sort of come up with here is a pretty radical departure as far as style and outfit or garment type, which is again the whole point of brainstorming is just to come up with a lot of different types of ideas and see what works. So for something like this, we could even do sort of like high leg armor, or technically greaves, something that cuts off up here, kind of mid-thigh. And it goes all the way down to the legs like so. And maybe this is the same color as the bodysuit up here. It's definitely a different feel. What I'm doing is adding some texturing on the leg armor just to sort of rough in. If I just take a couple extra minutes, I can actually just finish this rough sketch for this particular armor set, which is fine. Do something like a little bit more of an armored look for the shoes. You have kind of like a forked patterning on the ends, which is interesting. Maybe we'll move the arm out to the side and down, that way it's not necessarily taking up as much space. You can go down here. Like so. And maybe for this arm, if we were thinking about it like maybe someone who's operating some sort of weapon that requires this part of their body to be free and not restricted with something like armor, we could do something like have kind of like an arm wrap that goes down. You can add like an arm bracelet. Up here, but then this arm is not completely unprotected. It's just sort of left less restricted for the purposes of movement or mobility, something like that. If we wanted to add additional details, we could even put the same sort of decorative characters on this particular part of the fabric that goes down. Like so. I won't bother moving. Actually, maybe I can. All I have to do is duplicate it. Move this over here. Might be a little bit high, but again, just for approximation on what we're designing here with the outfit, I think that's fine. Again, final form and render, when everything's inked and colored, it's gonna have all this merged together. I just have the head part here as a placeholder, since it's gonna be the only part between each particular outfit design that's not gonna change. Alright, so this one actually didn't take quite as long to knock out as the other one, which is interesting. It's more complicated, for sure. The ideas just sort of came together a little bit faster, which is fine. What we have on the right is a bit more of an armor style versus just a straight clothing style. But what we have here is this part that protects the shoulder and arm and part of the body, an upper torso plating, and then an entire arm guard that goes all the way down. And then there's a midsection guard here that leads to this lower midsection piece, lower body, and it's connected to this sort of draping fabric. And then for the legs, there are these high-reaching greaves or armored pieces, and this part in the middle. Again, interesting contrast to the first design, which is definitely more clothing. I would like to experiment around with some concepts that, again, kind of blend between just regular clothing and garments and actual armor. I have no idea what I want to use for this character. So at this point, it's just coming up with ideas and designs and seeing what sticks, which is the whole point of the character study here. But based on the progress we've made so far, I think we will go ahead and call that for today's drawing stream. I could have worked a little bit longer on these, but again, I have some people coming over in a little bit, and I gotta go start getting ready for that. But when we sit down for that character study next time, assuming I don't offline put some more concepts together, we will continue to experiment around with outfits and see what we come up with before we zero in on something that's going to fit for the actual character that we're going to use. So, that said, we'll go ahead and call it here. Once again, thanks for all the folks who stopped by and hung out on today's drawing stream. It's always interesting to bounce ideas off other people. So I appreciate people just hanging out for a little bit and chilling. But I will catch you guys in the next stream. Have a good evening.